We are going to go ahead and wait about 5 minutes, see if any other board members come, because once we do start, they cannot participate. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence their phones, and if
Recording
you
in
still,
progress.
and if you still do have a pager, if you put that on silence also. Thank you. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If the matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the City Commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to Resolution Number 2021-118, the City of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. Accordingly, any individual wishing to provide sworn testimony shall be present physically in the City Commission chambers. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments non-sworn and without evidentiary value. Has that changed?
If someone appears on Zoom to give testimony, as I understand it, the procedure now is that they've been sworn in as long as they can be seen. If they're on telephone, then they cannot provide sworn testimony. But if they're on Zoom, and the court reporter then would swear them in.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist pursuant to the City of Coral Gables Ordinance Number 2006-11 must register with the city clerk prior to engaging in lobbying activities or presentations before city staff, boards, committees, and or city commission. A copy of the ordinance is available in the office of the city clerk. Failure to register and provide proof of registration shall prohibit your ability to present to the board. As chairman, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board meeting of June 21st, 2020 to order. The time is 6:04. Jill, please call the roll.
He requested to be excused. Alex
Correct.
Costello.
Here.
Claudia Miro.
Here.
Luis Revolta. Vinnie Torrey.
Here.
Chip Withers. Here. ABS and staff.
Here. Notice regarding ex parte communications. Please be advised that this board is a quasi-judicial board, which requires board members to disclose all ex parte communication and site visits. An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, and/or written or verbal communication that takes place outside a public hearing between a member of the public and a member of the quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the board. If anyone made any contact with a board member regarding an issue before the board member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication and the party who originated the communication. Also, if a board member conducted a site visit specifically related to the case before the board member must also disclose such visit. In either case, The board member must state on the record whether the ex parte communication and/or site visit will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding the matter. The board member should also state that his or her decision will be based on substantial competent evidence and testimony presented on the record today. Does any board member have such a communication or site visit to disclose at this time? I did receive an email from a member of the public. I went ahead and sent it over to Jill, asked her to please print that for distribution to all the board members.
Jill, is that comment made also available to council? Do we have an extra copy here?
Yes, it was provided to Mr. Garcia.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Swearing in. I would like to ask, first of all, if everybody that's going to be speaking tonight before agenda item that is here, to please make sure that you register with Jill so that she will call you when it's your turn. Also, I'd like to ask everyone who speaks this evening to please go ahead, with the exception of attorneys, everybody including city staff, to please stand in the chambers to be sworn in. Thank you. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open your chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez, stating the item number that you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn, and you will be sworn in at that time if we can see you on Zoom. I would ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I will also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. We have for tonight the approval of the May 11th, 2022 minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at those? Yes. Is there a motion?
Yes.
We have a motion by Claudia, second by Alex. Any comments? No. Call the roll, please.
Claudia Miró,
Yes.
Benny Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers.
Yes.
Alex Busalo,
Yes.
A.B. Asensat.
Yes. The procedure we'll use for tonight's agenda. First, we'll have the identification of the agenda item by Mr. Caller. Then we'll have the presentation by the applicant or its agent. It will be followed by presentation by staff. I will then go ahead and open up for public comment, first in chamber, then in Zoom platform, and then the phone line platform. I will then close a public comment. We'll have board discussion, then a motion, discussion, and second of motion if necessary. Board's final comments and a vote. Tonight we have one item on the agenda, which is for 1505 Ponce de Leon Boulevard. So items E1 through E5 are for that property. Mr. Caller?
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we're going to read all of them in, and we'll have one hearing on all the items, and then we'll have separate votes on each item. Item E1, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, amending the future land use map and mixed-use overlay district map of the City of Coral Gables comprehensive plan pursuant to zoning code Article 14, process section 14-213, comprehensive plan text and map amendments and small-scale amendment procedures from commercial mid-rise intensity to commercial high-rise intensity for lots 3 through 5 and lots 18 through 20, and from multifamily medium density to commercial mid-rise intensity for lot 6, block 36, Douglas section, and extending the North Ponce de Leon Boulevard mixed-use overlay zoning district to include lots 6 and 17 of said block 36, 1505 Ponce de Leon Boulevard, 126 and 122 Menoris Avenue, Coral Gables, Florida, providing for repeal of provision, severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E2, An ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, making zoning district boundary changes pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14, Process Section 14-212, Zoning Code Text and Map Amendments for lots 3 through 5 and lots 18 through 20 from Mixed Use 2, MX2 District to Mixed Use 3, MX3 District, and for Lot 6, Block 36, Douglas Section from Multifamily 2, MF2 District to Mixed Use 2, MX2 District, and extending the North Ponce de Leon Boulevard Mixed Use Overlay District to include lots 6 and 17 of said Block 36. I'm going to dispense with these addresses, providing for a repealer provision and severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E3, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, granting approval of Planned Area Development, PAD, pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14, Process, Section 14-206, General Procedures for Planned Area Development for a proposed mixed-use project referred to as 1505 Ponce on the property legally described as lots 1 through 6 and lots 17 through 22, Block 36, Douglas Section, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions, providing for repeal of provision, severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E4, a resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, approving mixed-use site plan and conditional use review pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14, Process Section 14-203, conditional uses for proposed mixed-use project referred to as 1505 Ponce on property legally described as lots 1 through 6 and lots 17 through 22, Block 36, Douglas Section, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions, providing for a repealer provision, severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E5, a resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, approving receipt of transfer of development rights, TDRs, pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14, Process Section 14-204.6, review and approval of use of TDRs on receiver's site for the receipt and use of TDRs for a mixed-use project referred to as 1505 Ponce, property legally described as lots 1 through 6 and lots 17 through 22, Block 36, Douglas Section, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions, providing for repealer provision, severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E1 through E5, public hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Sierra?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you very much for convening this special meeting for what we think is a special project, and we hope you agree. My name is Mario Garcia Serra with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue. I'm representing Location Acquisitions, which is the contract purchaser for the property located at 1505 Ponce de Leon Avenue. I'm joined today by Mr. Rishi Kapoor, Vivian Bonet, and Leonard Roberts, all of Location Acquisitions, and also Hamed Rodriguez, our project architect, and Matthew Lewis, our project landscape architect. Rishi's first project in Coral Gables, the Via Valencia project, located at 515 Valencia Avenue, has achieved great success, and he is looking to replicate that model here at 1505 Ponce. Via Valencia is characterized by low density, large units, and generous public open spaces, and that is what is proposed for 1505 Ponce. There is a lot to like about the 1505 Ponce project. Its density is less than half of what is presently permitted today. Under today's zoning, 179 units would be permitted, and we are proposing 80 units, less than half. The project's providing almost 30% of its lot area as open space, when 20% is what is required. Within that open space, there will be 2 public parks, which will include a 6,600 square foot linear park fronting Ponce de Leon Boulevard, and a 6,240 square foot park on the east side of the site, which would be ideal for a much needed dog park in the area. Lastly, the one existing structure on the property, which is a small historic apartment building located at 122 Menorahs, which was built in 1925 and is was designed by George Fink, one of the city's founding architects, will be preserved and adaptively reused as an amenity space for the building. I'm sure that all of you can appreciate that having a developer that embraces historic preservation is building less than half of the density permitted and proffering 2 public parks as part of a project is unique and welcomed. Now, if we could have the presentation up on the screen. Okay, here's a rendering of the project. Here is the project site. It's a 1.56 acre property just east of Ponce between Menores and Mendoza Avenues. You will see that as part of the architectural presentation that a key feature of this project is moving the tower off of Ponce so as to avoid creating a sort of condo canyon up and down Ponce de Leon Boulevard. However, in order to accomplish this, we need the MX3 zoning, which fronts Ponce and that permits the proposed height of the tower to move eastward. If you could go down to the various zoning maps.
Go to the map.
Yep. There you go. As you can see, the top is the future land use map. The bottom is the zoning map. On the left before, on the right, or on the left existing, on the right proposed. And what we are basically doing, the MX3 and commercial high designations which exist fronting Ponce, we are pushing them eastward so that tower can go eastward and avoid the condo canyon effect, but still preserving a buffer there between the properties to the east and us of about 60 feet, which is where the historic building will remain and be preserved, where the park will be also, and provides about a 60-foot buffer to our closest neighbor. You can go back maybe to the renderings. The result of those changes also provides a slight increase in FAR of about 20,000 square feet and also allows the easterlymost 2 lots to be part of the larger receiving site for TDRs. We're essentially taking a property which has multiple land use and zoning designations and making it more uniform to facilitate what we think is a better design, which has considerable public benefit, low impact, and considerable, which has low density and considerable public benefit. With that said, I'd ask Hamid now to walk through the design presentation, and then Matthew will talk about the proposed parks, and then we'll wrap up the presentation.
Thank you, Mario. Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. We're here with great pleasure to present this project. We think it's on the heels of a project we're very proud of, and it's very much in that spirit. I'm going to go back to the beginning.
Could I ask you to just state your name and
Oh, I'm
address
sorry.
for the record?
Yeah, sorry about that. Hamed Rodriguez, architect, offices at 275 Minorca, Coral Gables. Let me back up a little bit. Bear with me.
That was a little quick for me, I didn't follow.
And that's a wrap. No. Let's see if I'm headed back in the right direction. No. Here's where I got stuck. I'm just going to close it and reopen it. There we go. Yeah, that's more like it. There we go. Okay. So one of the major moves that we're doing here is we're pushing the building back a bit in order to avoid this this canyon effect. As you can see that the 2 larger buildings directly to the south already squeeze the space in that particular area. And you can see all of the isometric views here. And then we would be pushing back to create a little bit of a relief and a front linear park, a very public park. You can see here we've inserted the model So you can see how it would fit into context with the existing two larger buildings that are there now. And this would be a northwest view, northeast. And here's some diagrams, which I'll get into that in another slide. The main site plan here, we were taking parking access off the fronts of the streets. And everything you see here in green is the almost 30% of open space, the area within the property lines. So we are creating a nice linear park in the front, a 30-foot width minimum. And on the back here, we're using, it's a clear 60 feet, and then it tapers up as the building gets further away from the east property line. And the entire backyard of the historic building will be used as a secondary park, a different type of park. This one would have the dog park as well. And then what we're proposing to do to restore and rehabilitate the Norris building is to create a public benefit where it could be used by the public. It opens up to the back. The rear of that building is nothing spectacular now. It's just a bunch of bathroom windows. So we're really opening that up, set of French doors with an upper level that overlooks the park. And this is to show the proposed setback. So we're going to have a very generous setback from the neighbors to the east. And going into the renderings, we'll talk about the style that we selected. On this one, we're doing more of a Mediterranean style. We've already gone through the Board of Architects, and we are really using the material palettes that we've used before. A lot of stone, a lot of screening, and we're using more of a Moorish type of screening for areas of hiding, parking, which we'll show you when we get to the plans, the levels that they're in. So here in the front, we did a very elegant arcade, and it's a very public front. It's very transparent, extremely high first floor, and the idea there is that's going to be commercial and most likely a couple of restaurants. And then the screening is extremely deep in the architecture, so we gave ourselves a lot of relief so that we can employ this screening material and also make sure that we completely hide any parking lights or anything of that nature, so you don't see anything coming through that, much exactly like we did on the last project. And here on the sides, you could see that the entry into the building first takes you in through a vehicular paseo, and then from there, you'll see how we actually approach the parking so that nothing is seen from the streets. And here you see that these are all the live work on the ground floor. So it goes from retail in the front, and as you move east, it works its way into the live work. And then again, more commercial use in the historic building, right to the left. Here you can see the stepping that we have for the building along the back. And there's a human scale here if you were going on the sidewalk and approaching the park. And then, of course, Matthew will get into the exact details of the landscape, but it's going to be a tree canopy park for shade. And then we also have created a pedestrian walkway to take you from the north to the south, or back, or vice versa. And you'll see that here. So we have a very generous paseo that'll take you from one end to the other without having to go all the way around the building. And then this would be from the north side looking south. And this would also incorporate a little patio here for the restored building. And this would be the front linear park. So the idea here is that it will have a very comfortable wide colonnade so that those restaurants can have outdoor seating as well and have this nice buffer between punts and the outdoor seating. So it could be used as a park, and it also buffers from a busier street. So this would be an idea of how it would feel as the building is stepped back, and we have the podium that then steps back further from the tower. And going to the floor plans, this is the sub-level plan. So this does the majority of the parking. And this next floor here You can see that everything in yellow here is retail. And this driveway paseo is to be very active. As a matter of fact, we have glass along the backside of the retail as well, because we do see that as being a very well-lit, active space. Then we have a ramp up and a ramp down. So none of this is seen, and there's plenty of stacking so that there's no issues with a vehicle being delayed at the curb cut. And then we've also concealed all of our back-of-house deliveries and garbage, and none of this would be seen. This would be the next level, which would have residential around the back, and it's going to conceal 3 levels of parking. So this is 3 levels like this. And here's the main deck. So this would be the roof of the parking podium, also the 5th floor of the building. And it has all of the pool activities and cabanas and amenities which are being developed. And then we will have some of the residential begin on this floor. This would be the typical floor as it moves up, and it's 6 units per floor, 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, plus dens. And then this would be the penthouse level, which we're still developing, but it's going to be 2 levels of per unit. And with that, I will take any questions, or we can go straight to landscape.
What we'll do now, we'll ask Matthew Lewis, our landscape architect, to discuss landscaping in general and the parks in particular.
Hi, Matthew Lewis from Land, 7294 Northwest First Court. As I'm also part of the team that's continuing to finish up the Villa Valencia project just down the street. I just stopped by there prior to coming to the meeting today, and I was quite happy with all the live oak trees that were recently planted last week, and we have 4 additional plants going in, 4 additional live oaks going in next week. I think it's really important, as a landscape architect and looking at a site like this, to really have a generous amount of open space, and what that allows us to do is to really allow the trees to have proper root growth, so we're not sitting on top of a garage, and so that the process of tree growth remains natural. Per requirements, we're required to have 42 trees on site. In this plan, we have 47. On the north side of the site, we have street trees, which are going to be green buttonwoods. Same to the south. The entrance to the live work units are going to have some beautiful Clusia roseas, and then along the frontage along Ponce de Leon, we have 2 character Pachira aquatica trees, which are gorgeous trees from South America that have these beautiful trunk structures. Those sit at each of the corners, with 5 or actually 7 live oaks in between those within the public realm. At the dog park, we have 8 oak trees there that form a nice symmetrical form to the park. And just in general, all the landscape that we're doing, 90% of it's native. So that's going to require much less water than a non-native landscape. And I think what's also great, and the generosity of Rishi and the clients that I work for at Location Ventures, they really put a lot of good, nice funding into large mature trees. So in theory, once this project's planted in 3 or 4 years, anybody in the neighborhood that's walking around the site will be virtually covered in shade the entire way around the 3 sides of the property. So I think that's a really important add to the neighborhood as well. So if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Well, I think we are going to have questions and so forth, but I'd like to also have the city do their presentation
Of course.
beforehand.
Thank you.
And we just have a few comments on the staff recommended conditions of approval, which perhaps they can address as part of their presentation also. The recommendation is for approval for the 5 items. One of them is recommended for continuance. We're fine with that. The one that's recommended for continuance is the TDR approval. We need to first identify where the TDRs are coming from, get them approved by the Historic Preservation Board, and then go back to City Commission. So a condition of approval tonight would be getting those approvals within 6 months for the TDRs. On the conditions of approval, which start on page 21 of the staff recommendation, on 1C, we think there might be a typo there. It says sidewalk extensions and crosswalks on the west side of Galliano and Sidonia intersection. We think that might be Mendoza, since Sidonia is considerably further to the north. Going to section 5, which talks about the conditions of approval that need to be satisfied prior to issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy. There's two of them, 5B and 5G. 5B has to do with underground utilities, 5G with right-of-way improvements. We're fine with the substance of the condition of approval. What we would like for you to consider is some sort of modification in the language regarding when they need to be done. In other words, right now they're worded in such a manner that they need to be done before TCO. From this client and many other clients' experiences with dealing with FPL on the issue of utilities or water and sewer, or the county or FDOT on the issues of right-of-way improvements, we're sort of held hostage to those utilities or those government entities reviewing and approving plans, and in the case of FPL, actually doing the work. So if we could put some language in there that would be prior to final CO, or at least give staff the opportunity or the discretion to extend it to final CO, we think it would lead to a more effective, condition of approval, and one that will not create any issues in the future. In that same section, section 5E, my clients had some discussions with staff that instead of the 20 remote residential parking spaces in the garage, that the amount of remote residential parking in the garage be equivalent to the loss of on-street parking, which we have at 9 spaces that are being lost on street parking. So we'd request that to change from 20 to 9, just to be reflective of what's actually being lost on the street. With that said, I think we could do the staff presentation now in public hearing, and we'll reserve some time for rebuttal if necessary.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jennifer Garcia, City Planner. If I could have the PowerPoint, please. So as I discussed, the site is between Menottes and Mendoza, facing Ponce, on the east side of Ponce. And as you can see from the aerial, the site is mostly vacant, except for one historic property in the northeast corner. On existing conditions, you can see there's a trolley stop. There's new trees that have been planted by Public Works on Mendoza and Menottes. Otherwise, it's a very blank, vacant lot. So they have 5 requests: comprehensive plan map amendments, zoning map amendments, PAD designation, mixed-use site plan, and the TDRs. So the first one, as he discussed, is basically divided into 3 different requests. The first one is extending that commercial high-rise intensity from the back of the lots that are facing Ponce Leon and moving it all the way back to the existing boundary that we can see in the green dotted line of the North Ponce mixed-use district. The second one would be the change of land use of that historic property from a multifamily medium density, this is comp plan, to commercial. And then last would be the extension of the existing North Ponce mixed-use overlay district to include the entire property. So second request is the zoning map amendments. Very similar, extension of the MX3 zoning to include all the way, except for one lot away from the end of their property on the east side. The change of zoning for the historic building, which is now MF2, to make that into MX2, and to extend that North Ponce de Leon mixed-use district to include the property. So they're also asking for a PAD designation, a planned area development. And as you know, a PAD is basically a magic number. When you have 1 acre, you're allowed to be a PAD, if approved, obviously, in exchange for public benefits. So what they're providing is linear plaza of 6,600 square feet on Ponce Leon. Also, the garden dog park that's in their rear, that's about 6,200 square feet, and adaptive reuse of the historic building. In addition, staff's recommending some crosswalks and traffic calming based on recent policy decisions and policy initiatives by the commission. That's been included in the conditions of approval. The fourth request is mixed-use site plan. Here you can see the vehicular entrance, that linear park that's facing Ponce, the ground floor retail, the live work units, the historic building being reused as a retail space, the pedestrian via, which is on the rear, and the dog park. And the last is the TDRs, and they've already explained that they're going to go through the process. Staff has that recommendation of having it as a conditional approval as part of the PAD and the mixed-use site plan. But they do that within 6 months of approval. So in summary, the left column is the allowed required if they make these changes to the land use and the zoning. So again, 1 acre requirement, 20%, they're way over that at 29.6%. They're under their density, they're at their height requirement, the height maximum, and they're at their maximum as far as FAR when they receive those TDRs. Their setback actually is very generous at 30 feet. Their setback is also very generous facing Ponce. The parking spaces, they're well over. So the review timeline, they've had the DRC meeting back in March 25 of this year, BOA a couple of times, the neighborhood meeting, which I include the summary of those minutes of that meeting in your packet for planning and zoning. And today we're here on June 21, and they're scheduled for first reading next week, next Tuesday. Letters went out to property owners within 1,500 feet of the property. And again, 3 times we've mailed letters to the property owners, 3 times property postings, 3 times for website posting, and 1 time for newspaper ad. And staff determined that it's consistent with the comp plan. And there's 5 requests. We recommend approval of most of the requests, except for number 5, a continuance to the TDRs. And in summary, the conditions of approval are pretty standard. The special ones, the first one being the TDR process, to follow that process within 6 months of the mixed-use site plan approval. The traffic calming, crosswalk on Ponce, the raised crosswalk on Mendoza and Galeano, speed cushions and tables. This is all based off of the city's traffic calming plan. Sidewalk extensions on the west side of Galeano and Sidonia, which is north of their site. This is based off of the commission's interest in having more sidewalks in the area. And then number 4 is remote residential parking. The intent was actually not to provide what's being lost, but just a general public benefit to the neighbors who have a limited amount of parking. But the number can obviously be discussed. And that's what I have.
Thank you. Jill, how many speakers do we have in chamber?
No one has indicated to speak.
In chamber, what about in Zoom
No,
and phone?
no one.
So if we have no speakers at this time, I'll go ahead and close it for public comment. Mario, did you want to?
Mr. Chair, we only received 1 email that was forwarded to me from former Commissioner Cabrera, who was in support of the project in concept. His comment had to do with the loss of on-street parking on the street. He's been consistent with that position now probably for 20 years since he served on the city commission. From our viewpoint as a developer, it's whatever the city tells us we'll do. Right now the city streetscape plan requires those landscape bulb outs, which result in the loss of some on-street parking. That's why they're in the plan. But if the determination of this board and or the city commission is that we should eliminate some of them so as to keep more on-street parking, that's acceptable to us also. With that said, this project has been very well received by the other city boards that have reviewed it, been well received by the neighbors who attended the neighborhood meeting. Your staff is recommending approval with conditions. The conditions we're generally in agreement with. There's maybe some fine tuning there on some of them. And we would ask that you follow that recommendation and recommend approval of the various items that are before you and continuance of that 1 item on the TDRs. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one clarification from council. There's a recommendation for continuance on the TDR item. Is it your intent to come back to the Planning and Zoning Board on the TDR item? Or is it your desire that that item be acted upon by the Planning and Zoning Board?
No, we would be coming back with that after we go to Historic Preservation Board and get receiving site approval.
So you're fine with a deferral to, I guess, a date uncertain for the TDR item?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
And you would not have to publish then?
Well, it would have to be renoticed, but since we don't know when it's going to come back from historic preservation, they'll have to re-advertise it unless we want to pick a date certain if you think you would be back.
It's going to be noticed at the Historic Preservation Board, so I don't think we can determine yet the actual date. We'll have to renotice again when the time comes for Planning and Zoning Board.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, there is one speaker on Zoom.
Okay, let's go ahead and hear that speaker, please. Can you call him?
Ms. Cruz?
Yes? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, but we can't see you. If you'd like to be sworn in, we would need to see you.
Can you open your camera, please?
It's open. I don't know how to, my camera is open. How do I do that? I can't, my camera is open. I see it open.
Correct, so we would not
You
be
know
able
what?
to
Right.
swear her in.
That's okay. I can still speak, right?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's fine. Here we go again. Maria Cruz, 1447 Miller Road. Let me share with you some concerns. This is not the first time. Residents like me buy a property. When we look at the property, we know what we can build. I would not dare go and ask the city to let me build a larger home that would fit in my property. Because you know what? Oh, here we go. Okay. That would not be acceptable. All right. But we see this time and time again.
Ms. Cruz, we can
Developer-
see you now if you'd like to be sworn in.
Yes. You see my hand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
1 second, please, Ms. Cruz.
Sure.
Please state your name for the record.
Maria C. Cruz.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this Zoom meeting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz.
You're welcome. Thank you. This is a concern. Developers buy properties knowing the limitations of the property. But that's okay, because then they can come in and ask for this, that, and the other thing. As a matter of fact, in this property, we're asking for 5 changes. Okay? And of course, the reason is because you know what? They're going to do wonderful things. I can do wonderful things in my property too, but I can't because there are limitations. Developers can do it. I love the idea that there's 2 buildings, 2 large buildings are there. Oh yeah, so now there's 2, now we're gonna have 3. So next developer will say, there's 3, so why not a 4th one? Pretty soon that whole area will be all gigantic buildings. That's not what Coral Gables is all about, but that's okay, because you know what? There's 2 buildings there already, so we're gonna allow this one to be the 3rd, okay? We're talking 16 stories, 16 stories, you know, just a little bit taller than normal, only 16, okay? I love the way that the person that was speaking said that the park can be used by the public. What do you mean can be used? If it's a public park, it's a public park. What do you mean can be used? Should be available to use, should not be qualified. And the paseo again, so that the business there can have tables. So the paseo is not really for the use of the public, it's for the use of the businesses that will be there. Okay? I do not understand. I think we're getting to the point where, you know what? By the time I die, we will have Brickell all over Coral Gables. I think the time has come for somebody to say, when you buy the property, make sure that that property is what you want, and make sure you read what you are able to build, and don't come ask for any more. Because you know what? There's no limit. Everything can be changed. And you know, it's very nice when you hear, very nice, you know, everything is gonna be great. You know, the one of the parks, you know, is just in the back. And there's just this and there's just that. The bottom line is eventually the public won't feel welcome there because there are limitations. Now, we also have 80, if I remember correctly, there were 7, what is it, live to work or work to live or whatever it's called. Okay, no, 6, there's 7, and there's 80 that are not. So, wow, we have some live to work possibilities there. And the people that there's 6 units per floor, those people that will be buying this or renting, because I don't know whether it's a rental or a ownership, those people that are going to pay for 6 units per floor are not going to impact traffic because they're going to use public transportation. That's why we're building it here next to public transportation, because I'm going to pay big bucks to live in this building, and I'm going to share transportation with the people that come to work in the restaurants, etc. You know what? Fantasyland. This is all about Fantasyland. And the sad part is the people didn't even expect this meeting today. And I heard at the beginning, special meeting. The meeting was supposed to be Wednesday. It took me by surprise that it's Tuesday, because normally it's Wednesday. Why do we need to accommodate? You know, we're here to accommodate the people that want to build the big developments. That's the bottom line. And I'm sorry, but you know what? I hope you understand that the people that live in this city are not happy, because that's not what we moved here to. We didn't move here. We wanted to live in the middle of big buildings.
Ms. Cruz, if you
Miami
could
Beach
please
is
wrap it
available.
up. Thank you.
Okay, the bottom line is, this is not the Coral Gables that we envisioned. This is not what we moved here for. And I'm sorry, there has to come a time when people hear the word no. If it doesn't fit in that property, don't build it. Find someplace else. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else, Jill?
No more speakers.
Okay, then we are going to close it. Yes.
To respond. The project is proposed as a condo project, so this is a condominium project, not a rental project. The parks are clearly the one in the east, and on the one on the west side going to be public parks. There's going to be a public open space easement granted to the city in perpetuity for the public to use that at the developer's cost to maintain that area. It's, you know, if you look at the changes that we're proposing, a lot of the change that we're proposing is to be able to move that tower further east so it's not fronting on ponds and sort of creating the canyon effect. The 16-story height is already permitted on ponds, you know, in the area that's the property that fronts ponds today. The density of this project is less than half of what is permitted today. The floor area, there is some increase in floor area, but that is mostly as a result of the ability to acquire TDRs. Which of course is another city policy of being able to purchase TDRs from historic properties to ensure the historic preservation of those properties, or to provide park area and other areas, and then use that intensity in areas of the city, such as ponds, which is a major roadway and artery of the city where there already is fairly intense development. The idea that people are not happy with this particular project, we had a neighborhood meeting, it was well attended, people were actually very enthusiastic and complimentary about it. And as you can see from people who live in the immediate vicinity, there are no objectors here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Chip, could I have you go?
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
So I have questions all over the place. The first question I have is, this was the old Angel Buick site, and it was a auto dealership and repair and paint. Have all the environmentals been cleared? Has the city reviewed those? Has the city reviewed all the environmental studies and made sure they're all clean and everything? Not to put anybody on the spot, I just want to make sure we don't end up with
I
something.
was hoping that Public Works would be here, but they're not. Just the traffic consultant. Did you have any?
I can speak to that.
What phase, actually, what
Yeah,
phases
what
have
phase
you gone?
environmental, yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Well, environmental studies have been done, certainly a phase one, has it? Okay. Phase one was done, it was clean, no need for a phase two. And the entity that would be reviewing it wouldn't be the city, but Miami-Dade County, Miami-Dade Durham.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we're good with that? The site's clean and everything? Okay, and then, can I ask you another question, maybe? So on these neighborhood meetings, I'm very surprised a building this big in that area drew no objections except for the lady we
I
saw
think it's
this
just
evening at all?
the unique property has been there vacant for
Yeah,
a long
20
time
years,
since I've been
30
here,
years,
which is more than I've been here.
Yeah.
I think people that live in that area really want to see something there. You know, right now it's a fenced off property, and they just want to see development there. There's a lot of they say that there's 16-story buildings just to the south.
Right.
The commission, adopted this North Ponce mixed-use district a few years ago, and they really want to have that development on Ponce.
Is the developer been asked about maybe continuing the median up to 8th Street? I mean, right now their building kind of stops with the median, then the next block up, there's no median. Has there been any discussion about a joint venture
I
maybe?
wish Melissa was here to talk about that. But yes, that's Ponce Phase 3. I know a little bit about that. It is already funded. So I think asking a contribution from them may not be used well, but I can definitely reach out to Melissa, who's
I'm just
managing that.
talking about the
North of
harmonization
Salamanca.
of their property with their tree landscaping and what we're planning to do forward. I mean, I just, to integrate the two might be a,
The median project
Right.
between Salamanca and 8th Street.
Right.
Right.
okay, so the next question I have, and maybe you're not 100% sure on this, but I know that we've studied the heck out of North Ponce for 25 years, 30
Oh, I've
years.
seen, yes.
I don't know, there's probably been 4 or 5. And one thing that jumped out at me on I think it was the comp plan, the comprehensive map plan, was that every property kind of stays along Ponce in alignment. This one kind of juts back 2 or 3 lots.
Yes, and you see that actually in more recent developments, like Oficina, which is a few blocks north. They're actually, I think, about halfway in of that commercial, land use and also the zoning. And the same with the property south, 1300 Ponce, I want to say, the condo building right there.
So I guess my question is, have you looked at what the future visions were along Ponce? Was it to move back another lot off of Ponce with higher density?
That was the intent of the mixed-use overlay district, was to have, because you can see that that dashed line that I showed,
Right.
the green line, is well into the mid-block, and that's to support larger mixed-use development on Ponce, to be able to have that depth that you need, to be able to have the retail and the parking and all the amenities that you need to have a substantial footprint to be able to build up.
Okay, so this building seems to be the first one that has really given you a generous, I think it was 30-foot setback off of Ponce.
Yeah. Yes.
I know other lots will probably be developed now and will be asking for additional depth in there. Has there been any consideration of maybe requiring a greater setback along Ponce to mimic that? Because I think it really does look nice. It does relieve that canyon effect.
It could be a commission policy to look at studying that whole corridor and having usually being set back is a little more difficult for retail, depending on the retail. If it's a destination, they wouldn't have an issue, but depending on the retail, they usually like to be closer for visibility.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, so that going back one more lot or 2 more lots to the east, that is part of the vision on the Ponce corridor development?
Right, to be able to have a substantial footprint for large-scale development.
Okay. And then I'd like to ask Mario a question. Thank you very much. I don't understand your concern about the utility requirement and the TCO. You're
Right.
saying it says that it has to be in place before you're granted the TCO?
Correct.
And what you're saying is you
We're
don't want
completely
that?
hostage to FPL. Our project, Chief Development Officer could tell you more details about it, but it's not like our contractors installing those electrical lines underground. It's FPL itself, and FPL really goes by its own, schedule, its own agenda, its own priorities. And on other projects, it, quite often takes a lot longer than it does to complete the building.
Who pays FPL? Do you pay FPL?
We do.
You
Yeah.
pay FPL. And so they have the money and they have the approved plans. It's just that they haven't done the work. Is that the sequence?
Exactly. We're usually at a point that contract's been entered into, permit plans have been approved. We just wait and wait and wait for FPL to actually do the work.
And that's water also, or is that just Florida?
I think water and sewer might be a little bit less problematic, but Vivian, I don't know. Yeah,
Water and sewer, okay. And so, oh, thank you.
Vivian Bonet Rubio, 3072 Carter Street, Coconut Grove.
Could you repeat your last name, please?
You can
Because
lower the mic.
You can lower that if you want, or get her a box to stand on, one of the two.
Vivian Bonet Rubio, 3072 Carter Street, Coconut Grove, Florida. So what we're having problems with generally in Villa Valencia is the Florida Power and Light. Water and sewer hasn't been such a big issue. They work with us very, very fast. But Florida Power and Light, on Valencia, we started 3 years ago to work with them. We were able to get the alley underground, but they still have not even produced design drawings for Hernando. This is a weekly call, daily emails, and we have not been able to get them to cooperate. And we're paying for it. The bills are ours.
Okay.
This is one of the problems. They could hold us, hostage for TCO.
So it's not like a fire safety issue, is it? No, it's strictly Florida Power and Light.
Strictly underground utilities it's Florida Power and Light, AT&T, any of the cable companies are on those poles.
And so you want that TCO so you can start installing your FF&E and get your amenity spaces?
I
and
can
all
start closing units. Yeah.
that closing, but not moving in.
Yeah, they move in.
Do you have power?
Yes.
So you want residents to move in without a TCO?
No, I will have a TCO. I just don't need to have FP&L underground in certain areas for a TCO. The vault will be ready. Everything on site, like Valencia, everything on the project is completely connected.
So what would not be done?
It's the underground utilities on some of the streets that are not related to the project. We still have to do it, but I just require it for CO.
Okay. I mean, I feel comfortable with that, but I'd like to fully define what that is. I mean, if it's underground utilities on Menoris and Ponce and,
Yep.
so I don't know how we do that city-wise. If we're going to carve out certain,
Well, the only lines I'm familiar with are on ponds, which are not major FPL lines. I think they're just for the lights. Could be wrong. So there's not any major lines like Galeano. If you're familiar with the area, Galeano has major lines running through it. And so does Hernando, which is where the project they're talking about.
so it's
But in this
only the
project, there's not-
undergrounding on Ponce, that's the
Right.
only issue?
That's the only issue I know of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be fine. Yeah, that's the only one I would recall to have it for CO.
I don't have a problem with that.
The
Okay.
rest of the project will be done by TCO, not a problem. But something on ponds will definitely require a lot of permitting with city, state, and MOT.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Vinny?
All right. I'm in favor of the project overall, so I commend you for a good project. I really appreciate the...
Vinny, your mic may be off.
Is my mic off? Hello? Better? Thank you. I appreciate the setback, the green space, and I think the neighbors on the back will appreciate the 60-foot separation with the big green field in the back. That's really going to be a really big plus. So overall, I do have a lot of positives here. I just want to confirm a few things and ask a couple of questions. Some simple ones maybe first. So in the TDRs, and I really couldn't quite understand if there's a delay in receiving the TDRs or finding the source of the TDRs. So the other question is, are you taking TDRs from the building that's historical? Are you actually taking?
Well, that building, the 122 Menoris building, is part of the project site. So whatever additional development rights it's entitled to are already incorporated in the floor area.
So the issues with the TDRs specifically, I couldn't quite understand.
DDRs basically are, we need to identify the source of where it's coming from and get that source approved.
Okay, so you guys are going through with the project that's approved without really getting the final approval, which is the
Conditioned
the
upon-
extra square footage.
Right, conditioned upon getting that approval subsequently within 6 months.
Okay. And that's been done before? We actually can do?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? You just brought up a good point. Do you get credit for those TDRs above that historic building before this rezone or after the rezone?
After the rezone. In other words, that historic building at 122 Menorahs,
Is what, 6 stories, 7 stories? What is,
no, the existing building
yeah.
is only 2 stories
No, I know, but I mean, you can go 6 or 7 stories now?
today. Yeah,
Okay, so now you can go 16 stories. So by rezoning, you capture additional 10 stories of TDRs?
no, because we didn't include the 122 Menorahs project isn't within
Okay,
the change from medium to high.
got it.
Okay. So my questions are going to lead back to parking and the use of the sidewalks and some of the questions Mr. Cabrera brought up. But to get there, can you explain the flats, just to make sure I understand it? The ground floor and the second floor of the flats are connected?
That's a Hamed question.
That's, I would make sure that I know how those work.
Yes, so there's what we'll call the first floor and the second floor. That is the live work, so you could actually live there and work there. Then above that, we're proposing, which would be third and fourth floor, which would be 2-story high apartments. So social space on the third floor, bedrooms on the fourth floor.
But the first and second are one unit,
It's a live work.
correct? So it's called one unit
It's
specifically?
one unit.
Okay, and I was noticing the parking.
But it's not considered a residential unit, although you could sleep there. It's a live work.
Okay, so we got back to the question. So in terms of your retail, I'm trying to get to the 20,000 feet to get back to the parking you provided. The live work ground floor is part of the retail?
That ground floor is in the retail calculation.
So somebody could basically have a guest come in, mix their work there, and somebody's going to use the building as an office, let's pretend.
Somebody could take the upstairs if they wanted to and expand it to their office. The flexible part is the ground floor is the guaranteed retail use, and it's every square inch of it is for that use.
So the other question, the historical building has 2 floors, and you mentioned what the use of that was proposed, and I couldn't quite understand. Is that specifically and only for the residents, or is that for public use? I
That's
wasn't
for
sure.
public use.
The retail, so it's a retail
It's a retail.
establishment?
Yeah, I mean, the ideas that we've been talking about is something like a gourmet ice cream with coffee and something where you can go to the park and enjoy the space. And on the second floor, since that kind of retail wouldn't work, one of the ideas floated was possibly like a small executive offices for startups, which, you're right there. It's a nice place to visit, and you go up and you have a little startup office. So it's a good use
The
for
only
that.
concern for me is high traffic or high intensity affecting the neighbors towards the back, because that thing really comes around the back. So it's just a matter of is there any conditional restrictions that may apply later or something?
There is parking, and we need to figure whether it's going to be the underground parking or the next level up, which would be for the general retail use, because that's captured within the building. So that parking entrance starts closer to Ponce than it does the end of the property. So therefore, you'd go in there, and then you'd pop up through an elevator and walk over to that use.
Okay. And the 2 retails in the front is there a thought of restaurants or
Yes,
anything else?
more than likely restaurants.
Restaurant?
Yeah.
And I did not get into the weeds of the traffic study. Is there a shared parking thought process of how maybe some of these will be?
There will be. Right now, we have an abundance. The requirement, I believe, is 264, and we're at 318 or 317. And I know that as things get developed and columns, might get a little thicker, I might lose one or a tree or something, and therefore the calculation of patrons, because that's a different calculation than standard retail. We would exclude the kitchen, but then you'd capture the seating area. And therefore, at that point, we might start getting a lot closer to the number that we actually have, and therefore we will look into the shared opportunities, which we haven't yet, which would grant us a more flexible parking scenario. But right now, we're well overparked to give us that buffer.
I saw that. You have 54 additional spaces, and I was pleased to see that, so that's great. So the issue of remote off-street parking, you mentioned there was 9 being lost, and you were providing 20 or something to the, can you explain what that means, the remote off-street parking, 20 spaces?
I think both staff will explain it, but the condition of approval is for us to provide 20 parking spaces within the garage that would be used by the neighborhood, for the public. We were thinking that that number perhaps should be lower, equivalent to the amount that's being lost on the street, which we're calculating at 9.
Is this a mitigation to what Mr. Cabrera was sort of referring to, that there's a lot of more losses? So you're actually giving back, if you follow what staff requires?
I think if you were to ask former Commissioner Cabrera, he'd say that he wants to see the spaces on the street as opposed to on the garage. because
I
that's
get it.
where-
Right, and the intent here is actually, we've done in other projects, that there's a large parking garage in an area that's kind of in demand for on-street parking, is to allow residents to have a, overnight parking permit that they're allowed to have. There's a lot of 1920s buildings in that area that don't have any on-site parking. So the idea of this was to be able to offer them something in the parking garage, since they have so much available.
And did you say you prefer to go to 9 and not go to 20? Is that something you're rebutting?
Yes, I don't want to make it seem as if it's a point that we're going to fall on the sword on, but I think it's a fair reflection that we feel it's more than our share than what we should
So
be providing.
the 54 extra, you take away the 20 basically, because
Right.
those are going to be basically given out in a sense. Okay. All right. So then the final question is just the green space and the surrounding green space. The sidewalks currently mostly are 5 feet, and you're proposing some to be 10. Is that a good read? A lot of them in the front are growing, or I think are wider, and then they shrink in the back.
Right, our sidewalks are, that happens from the property line out. So the sidewalks right now are, the widest ones along Ponce. And then the other ones, we will make them exactly what they need to be. Right now, we made them a little smaller because we added some green space between the parking, the street parking, and the sidewalk, which is a nicer feature.
Right, to be able to transition into the existing
Yeah,
street.
but some of these long strips where you can't actually get out of your car and walk through the green, sometimes that's difficult too. So,
Right.
I mean, you have one that's really long here. I think I was looking at it on the north side.
On the north side.
It's really just one long strip of green, so that they put.
And then it opens up, I mean, we do have pockets in front of the live work, and then we have another little plaza in front of the historic building. But if we need to remove
I mean,
that
doesn't
or
it feel better
widen
to
it,
widen the sidewalk, provide lots of shade, but yet not have where you can't hardly walk through these sort of?
I mean,
Yeah, as long as you can be able to transition into the existing street section, which is to the east of them.
Sometimes you can't even open the door to your car because
I mean, we'll do whatever is deemed appropriate.
I think the key here is you guys done a good job to focus on the surrounding streetscapes and all that. I think that's where all the improvement that you could offer would be here. The last reviews, have you done a good job, I'm sure, with the trees and everything, but it's just that, and the question from Mr. Cabrera, is the bump outs necessary? And if you were to remove them, what can you do to make it still work nicely? It's just a review of that
Right.
process.
Could be tree grates and then hard.
Yeah, and I'm not sure this is a good or bad answer. I'm just saying is if there's going to be any more thought process, it should be to me.
Oh, there's going to be
in
more
those.
thought process on that, I'm sure.
That would be where I would focus most of on the streets and what people feel in touch and how they get back and forth. And the
And I'm
width of
assuming
the
through the
sidewalk.
permitting, I'm sure the bulb outs that are depicted on Ponce Leon will probably be removed just to be consistent with the rest of the Ponce Leon, which was probably what he was concerned about.
Excuse me?
The bulb outs that are shown on Ponce Leon, I'm sure like during the permitting process, those will probably be removed, so it'll be more consistent with the rest of the Ponce Leon.
And it will start
street
gaining
section.
some
Well, I
parking.
mean, you have Dina's thoughts and your thoughts and your thought. And I think putting it all together and trying to arrive at what would be the optimum, great solution to show that this is the best way to approach all the projects. I guess this is like a good model to use is, let's make it the best way we can.
Right, on
and
the
use
last
it.
project, it took a little while.
I agree.
In the process before we ended up with what we did
But
now.
it's such a different feature to have this thing pushed back and have, so you have a lot of opportunities to do, again, something that really flows all the way around and makes it
Noted.
the optimum, so. I think that's really it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you. Claudia?
Yes, thank you. So I also had some questions. I didn't want to interrupt you, Benny, about the parking. So you said there's 80 units, right, in the building? And so how many parking spaces does each unit get?
Let me give you what the numbers are. Okay, there is a total There's a total of 318 parking spaces provided. Now, how many are going to be assigned to each unit, I think is more really a product of, the interaction between the seller and buyer, between the developer and the end user of the condo unit. But based on recent experience, guys, it's usually 2 parking spaces per unit. Usually 2 parking spaces per unit. The penthouses, which are larger, usually get more.
Okay, but then I heard him mention that there was 54 extra spaces.
Over required, yep. So
Over
the
required.
amount of required parking is 269, and the provided is 318. Actually, 31 plus, it looks like, let me give you the exact number.
And if you look at page 16 of your staff report, you have the breakdown right there.
49 extra parking spaces.
49 extra parking spaces. Now, I hate to be redundant, but I just needed to get clarification on the 20 spaces that were going to be reduced to 9. So there was some talk about there being this, of course, the residential parking spaces, and then there's also going to be parking spaces for the commercial use. Is that included in the number that you just gave me, the 300 and
Yes.
some?
Yes.
And so the 20 parking spaces, is that also part of the commercial use?
The
you
20
talk about
parking
public-
spaces right now would be part of the overage that there is in parking. That's not necessarily required by any particular use.
So for commercial use, it's additional parking or the same?
The commercial use is generally 1 parking space for every 300 square feet of retail or office, and that's what's already baked into that 269 number.
But that increases if it's a restaurant or depending upon the use of that commercial
Right,
space.
and that's why we have an overage,
Right.
so that we can tailor that when it happens.
So it may not be an overage after all, depending on what comes in as far as
Well,
commercial.
we would also, if it isn't, if it's close, then, and we're gonna do this anyway, we're gonna look at the shared parking, opportunities that we have too. So we felt, because this early in the game, when we're developing a building, we have to give ourselves a cushion and make sure it all works at the end. And we feel confident that with this, even if they're restaurants, we're gonna be safe. So, that's
Okay,
what we always.
I just wanted to echo Mr. Torres' comments on the landscaping that just kind of abuts out onto Ponce de Leon and all around. I happen to live in the area, so I think that side street parking is very important to those of us who live there. I also think that it would be uniform. It would be better if it were uniform, so I think that you should consider that. And then I also wanted to ask you about the height. That is the maximum amount that is allowed for height in the area?
Correct.
And did you consider going any lower?
I think the program just wasn't allowing us to, right?
It's, I mean, as far as floors? Well, noting that, well, we didn't think to do that, being that we were so under on units, that we figured,
Under on density, you mean?
on density, correct.
But on height, you're at the very, very top.
We are at the very top. Yeah.
To get the program that we're proposing as far as quality of units, types of units and size, the 16 stories is what accommodates it.
I understand. And then when you were doing your presentation, you talked about this being a Mediterranean arcade, and then, our architects aren't here today. I can
Right,
ask
right.
them, but it doesn't look Mediterranean to me. It looks very square and boxy.
We drew from Mediterranean, and it doesn't have arches, if that's what.
It doesn't have arches.
It's not a literal Mediterranean take. It's a take of all the richness of materials, the stone, and then, when we had the presentation to the Board of Architects, we checked every box on the Mediterranean level 1, and all of the boxes, except for a couple, that we have those options on level 2. We only needed, I think it's all but 2, and then you could pick which ones. If you want to do a tower, some that don't do towers, exclude the tower for something else. And we comfortably arrived at all of those.
And I've seen, and I understand how that works. I've seen some of the buildings in the area, and I just think that we keep moving further and further away from the style of what Coral Gables is. And so I just wanted to put that on the record, that I think I appreciate that the building is set back. I do appreciate that. I also appreciate the dog park in the back because it separates from the residents, and I also think it is also a needed area. The closest park in the area is Phillips Park, and no dogs are allowed there, so I think that it's a welcome feature, and I'm glad that you clarified from the speaker's concerns about it being available to the public, because it should be something that the public should continue to be, if you're going to put it in there, right, that everybody should be able to use it. I think it's going to be highly used. You said it was going to be about 6,400 square feet, the size of the dog park?
Approximately.
Approximately. And then let me see. And then the historical building that's on the property is going to be used as retail space?
It's commercial space of some sort that will be determined at some point. But we're thinking that it should activate the park, whatever it is. And it will probably be some type of ice cream or coffee shop or some kind of a sundry or something beneficial to the neighborhood and to the project.
Okay. That's it. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex?
Most of my questions were tailored towards parking. I think my colleagues did a good job of narrowing down on the issues there. One of my main questions was, I see we only have one email from Mr. Cabrera. During the community meetings, any other issues arose that have been addressed? Any other issues brought up by residents in that area?
Interestingly enough, the off-street parking issue, the on-street parking issue, the loss of spaces on the street did come up because there's a good number of buildings around there built before parking requirements that don't have any parking areas and rely on the street in order to park. That was the one concern that was most expressed probably. Other than that, people very welcoming of the idea of the park spaces.
Very telling.
Very appreciative of it.
Very telling that we don't have any residents. That was it. My main questions were regarding parking.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
A lot of my questions were actually asked that I had. I also, the bulb outs on the city's, what is the city's position on the bulb outs and why are they required? I've been seeing them on projects over and over. I mean, is there somebody that
They're
can?
usually acquired on commercial streets, like you see more in downtown, just because you want those wider sidewalks. You only have 50 or 60-foot right of way to fit sidewalks, some kind of landscape on street parking and, travel lanes. And here, usually in the multifamily district, you don't have the bulb outs. You have the continuous green with the narrow sidewalk. So this project's trying to transition between the existing conditions and then try and incorporate bulb outs so that you can, have wider sidewalks to be more commercial.
You've gone ahead and created the bulb outs not only on the main street, but also on the side street.
Right, so Ponce Leon right now has that theme that has the bulb outs on the corners, but the inside of it, usually, unless it's a mid-block crosswalk, they don't have any bulb outs.
Correct.
But the complaint that a lot of neighbors have is that they don't have those shade trees because you don't have enough green space to be able to grow shade trees.
I think the on-street parking is much needed, especially in that area, and I would encourage the city to look at how not to eliminate those parking spaces.
On Ponce.
On Ponce.
Yeah, agreed,
And,
yeah.
and on the side street also.
I think the side street is, the only issue is the driveways. The driveways, I think, require 10 feet.
But it's taking away parking by doing that.
I absolutely
So
agree.
That would be my
I'm
comment
not an
on
engineer,
that.
though. I can't change that requirement.
No, but
So instead of having 10 feet of striped, they're proposing to have a 10 feet landscaped bulb out.
But I do encourage to take a look at that.
Okay, yeah.
This project, I guess it was answered. I wanted to know if the project was getting Mediterranean bonuses, and it is. Can you tell me how many square feet it's gaining by the Mediterranean bonuses?
The Mediterranean bonus gives us a bump up from 3.0 FAR to 3.5 FAR.
Okay.
Let me do the math for you. Let me see. Gives us an additional almost 34,000 square feet, 33,976.
And that would be equivalent, that would equate to how many stories additional? 30,000.
What's our floor plate here, Hamid? 13,000. So figure 2.5, to a little bit less than a half, 2.25.
About 2 stories?
Yep.
Okay.
We can only have one person speak at a time. If you want to come up, it's perfectly okay, but you need to come to the mic, and we have to
Thank
give the reporter a break.
Okay. Which is the 2 stories.
Okay, thank you.
For McNoy's too.
The traffic study, I noticed we haven't mentioned traffic study, but I noticed that there is a traffic study. Can you speak just for the record when the traffic study was done?
We have our city commission traffic consultant here, so I'm sure he can comment on that. The way it's been working now since about, 2 or 3 years ago when the code was amended, the applicant does a trip generation statement. If we exceed a certain number of new trips created, the city then goes and hires a traffic consultant at our cost. So the city then has its own consultant doing the analysis.
So in this case, the city went ahead and hired the traffic consultant?
Correct. And here we have him, John McWilliams with Kimley Horn.
Good evening, John McWilliams with Kimley Horn, offices at 355 Alhambra.
Thank you. When was the traffic study?
The traffic study was done in May.
In May of this year?
Yeah.
So we don't have the issue that the traffic study was done during COVID or when cars weren't out there?
Correct. School was in session.
Okay.
COVID, yeah, because the city has a policy that we don't collect traffic data if school's out of session, just to avoid that issue too.
Thank you for that. The other question that I have is there a reason that there isn't residential on the ground floor abutting Ponce? Was that looked at?
Yeah, it's a requirement that retail lines the ground floor.
So that's a city requirement?
Right.
Okay. On the area that we're talking,
You're 100% accurate on that answer. It has to be non-residential uses on the ground floor, not necessarily retail.
Interesting.
You could have restaurant, you could have live work.
okay,
That sort of
so
thing.
that's what the city is asking for?
Correct.
Okay. In the area for the TDRs, you're okay coming back within 6 months?
Yes.
So in other words, item number 5 is going to be deferred
Correct.
without a time certain. So it'll
Correct.
be posted and so forth. Is that correct? Okay. For me, the project is great. I like the project. I would just look at the Mediterranean as far as what is used on this project and what's acquired. I understand that you met all level 1, all the boxes were checked. You get to level 2, most of the boxes were checked, and you're entitled to do it. And I think that's a different discussion and not here. But I would encourage the Board of Architects to look at that with the Mediterranean bonuses and what is allowed or what's achievable. And I'm not saying I'm not a cookie cutter person. I really am not. I don't like every project to look with the steeples, the towers, the arches. I've even advocated, I think, many times for projects that are more modern and so forth. But I just think it's something that if you're going to get Mediterranean bonuses, it should be defined more.
Well, on this one here, we took it to heart that we really looked at Mediterranean architecture from, not Mediterranean architecture that's more created like a stage set. The root of Mediterranean architecture, the Moorish influence, the lines, the detailings, the recesses, and we are also proposing clay tile, and it's very high up, so it's hard to see. So some of those other areas you could see it. This one's as Mediterranean, more Mediterranean than many that are out there today. So, but it's a classy Mediterranean, and we really take pride in what we did.
It's a nice design. I agree with you.
Yeah. So, and the Board of Architects had a couple comments. We went back another time and then got approval that second time.
And on the right-of-way, the green area that you have, or the park that you're providing, how much of that is in the right-of-way as opposed to on the property?
The number that we gave you, the 6,600 square feet, that's completely on our property.
So it's not within the right-of-way or
From the
so forth.
property line. Yeah.
Okay. That's really the questions that I had. Yes, Chip?
I had one more, and there was a question was asked when you made your presentation. I think you said that the historic building was going to be used for amenity space for the building. When you made your comment, you said it was going to be used for commercial use. So which,
Well, the uses that are being proposed, at the end of the day, it's a commercial use, but both of them, the sort of coffee shop or ice cream shop on the ground floor and the executive, space on the second floor, the idea would be also that our residents could use that and
but not
it's
like
sort of an
office
amenity.
space? It's not intended to be office space or rental of office space or anything like that?
An outsider could come and get a cup of coffee or a cone of ice cream at the
To rent an
bottom.
office, to have an office in the building.
In the 122 Menorahs building, if somebody wanted to rent space in the executive suite level, we would let them do it, right? Yep.
So
You
it's
don't-
not an amenity space, it's a commercial office.
Probably better described as a commercial space.
Right.
But we see it as an amenity for the residents also,
It
too.
jumped out at me. So,
Right, that's true. It's considered an amenity because you can go down there and have a coffee shop, but it's more commercial.
well, as an amenity, I thought it would be like event space, if someone in the building wanted to have an event. I didn't anticipate it being an office building. So my question is, is the parking allotment counted as office space there at one for every 200 square,
One for every
300 square
300.
feet?
One for every 300.
300 square
Yep.
feet. So the entire building is, and that's part of and you're still in excess of 54,
Yes.
even
Yes,
counting that
that's
as one of
included in the
300.
parking
Correct.
count.
Okay, thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about your garage levels?
Sure. We have a lower level, which is a basement level, and it takes up about 80% of the site, not where the large mature trees are. We have earth there. And then above the first floor, our first floor is very tall, about 25 feet. Then we have 3 levels within the podium, just underneath the pool area. And if you want me to bring it back up, I could.
Well, the parking that is fronting on Ponce, how is that covered, or how are you using that?
Well, on the ground level that fronts Ponce, I'm pretty sure there's no parking area at all. Correct?
And the next level above that?
Well, if I understand you correctly, there's a sub-level,
Correct.
right? And then there's at the second floor in the podium, third, fourth, there's 3 levels, and that's set back 30 feet to the face of the podium.
But I think the question is also, how's it screened?
How's it screened? It's screened with multiple louvers. It's got a louver that is doesn't allow light to pass through it. And then it has a decorative screen, which is more of this Moorish style screen that we've selected for the entire podium. We're also doing railings with that on the residential.
In the past, Mario, haven't we used residential units to screen?
It depends on how close you are to the property
Right.
line. If you're beyond those 30 feet, you don't need a liner. If you're closer to the property line, that's when liners have been required.
Right. So we opted the option of setting back 30 feet. And we're actually further back to where the parking actually starts because those are very thick columns.
Okay, so by code, it's 30 feet.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments?
I do want to make a comment. So we talk a lot about Mediterranean. There was a couple of comments and positions and so forth, but I'm of the opinion that design is what matters. And, I think we've had lots of debates over the last year on this issue. I feel that Villa Valencia is one of the most attractive buildings that's been put up in a long time, and I commend you for that. I'm saying this is in light or in line with Villa Valencia's style. I'm fine with it. I think it matches our city style, and I know that you check the boxes, and there's a lot of gray area about what makes Mediterranean. But I think what should rule for us should be great design, and we should, give merit to when that happens. And this one seems to be, to me, following the same style. So I'm very much in favor of just great design and not necessarily to have arches because we have to have barrel tile and arches here. That's not my position.
Thank you.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Anybody would like to make, I guess we go through E1 through E4 because E5 is deferred.
Well, we'll need a motion on
Each individual item?
each individual item, and when we get to the TDRs, it would be a motion to defer to a date uncertain,
Understood.
or a motion to continue to a date uncertain. I do have some thoughts on some of the conditions, I guess, when we get to the approval of the site plan, some of the department's conditions. I don't know how the board wants to handle some of the issues that have been raised by the applicant. But E1 is the comp plan.
Correct.
That's pretty straightforward for this item. So that would be we would need a motion on E1 first.
Anybody like to make a motion on E1?
Make it.
We have a motion
I will second it.
That would be motion for approval.
with condition.
With
Well,
staff
there
conditions.
the conditions really are going to apply to the E3, not on the rezoning and not on the comp plan. And we'll look at the conditions on that. So the first one would be approval in accordance with staff's recommendation.
Correct.
On E1 is the motion.
We have a motion. Chip, you second?
Yep.
Any discussion? No, call the roll, please.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers.
Yep.
Alex Bucello,
Yes.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Avi Eisenstadt.
Yes. Item E2.
Okay,
I will
item E2 is the rezoning
Correct.
item
I will also make a motion for approval with staff's recommendation.
With
in
staff.
accordance with staff's recommendations.
Yes, sir.
Second.
We have Alex at second. Any comments? No, call the roll, please.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Alex Bucello,
Yes.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Avi Eisenstadt.
Yes.
So item E3 is the PAD, which is a conditional use. So actually, the conditions really apply to E3 and E4. On E3, there were two conditions that were discussed. One was 5B, there was a request that it essentially would read all public rights-of-way except on Ponce de Leon, the underground utilities would be completed at time of certificate of occupancy
By Florida Power and Light.
by Florida.
Well, I don't know if they
Well,
only
I don't know
spoke
if
about
it's-
only Florida Power and Light.
I don't
think
know
they were
if it's
talking about
just-
utilities, but they stressed Florida Power and Light as being the issue.
I'm not sure, there may be other ones. It's just general underground utilities, so I don't know.
They
if
said
it-
the only concern was Florida Power and Light. They said water was fine, but I mean, if you want to include all utilities.
Well, I don't know if the underground utilities include the cable and all the other things, if they all go underground, and if they're dependent on FPL, which is going to share those underground utilities with any other utilities such as cable, so they might be held up with more than just FPL. So
They
to
share
be
the
on,
same tranche or something.
yeah, to be on the safe side, I would say underground utilities on Ponce de Leon is an exception to be done at CO, but if staff has a thought on that.
What's
We
your
could also
position?
add language that would allow, a planning director or public works director or some city staff to be able to extend to a maximum of the, CO or something. So just in case that does happen, that there's a way that we can, a little wiggle room that we can have without saying you can wait until the CO.
I mean, the city manager was just given the right to rescind a CO recently. I mean, if something's not happening, you can just take it back.
Well, the CU, yes.
The CO, but I'm saying, yeah, so maybe there's a 6-month extension for worst-case scenario, and then there's still the manager's right to take it away.
The discussion was done just now about on Ponce. So would it only reflect on Ponce in that area?
The undergrounding?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Chip?
I'm okay. I mean, I think to remove any subjectivity, even though I like our city manager, I think they're looking for relief in case Florida Power and Light drags their feet. And I have no problem adding other utilities that might share the same.
And that happens a lot when you have Comcast and FPL, they have a pole, it's not my pole, it's your pole, and that happens quite a bit.
But as long as all fire and safety issues are taken care of, I mean, that's important, because if they're going to have people moving in without
Oh, absolutely.
CO.
Right.
Good evening, Jose Olivo, Deputy Public Works Director. I think just to be clear, I think they'll need a CO or TCO to have water and sewer done, for sure.
Water, and so that's what I asked.
So be careful, I would say, with saying utilities overall. I think we want to just say maybe power and communications, perhaps.
I agree, because you're going to need
And
water
at the
for,
discretion of the Public
That
Works
works.
Department.
Thank you for clarifying.
Exactly.
for fire
Exactly.
suppression, so absolutely.
There's a lot of life safety issues that come into play and fire and things
Right.
like that. Okay,
Thank you for clarifying that.
no problem.
So the other condition, since we have to straighten out these conditions before we act on 3 and 4, is the issue of the 20 remote parking spaces. I think the request is that be reduced to 9. And actually, looking at that condition, I think it really should state a minimum of X remote spaces, not a maximum, because a maximum of X remote spaces means if they were to supply 1, that would comply with the maximum. So I think it's a minimum of X number of spaces shall be required. So however the board wants to do it, I think it should be, some sharp lawyer might want to interpret that, even though staff intended it to be 20 spaces. So I would just fix that language a little bit. So it would be a minimum of X number of spaces shall be required for remote residential parking in the evening, whatever number you all want
that-
to recommend.
That parking would be available to residents in the area, is that the idea?
Maybe staff wants to explain that.
This is an idea that actually comes from the North Ponce Community Vision Workshops. Identifying this property, knowing that it's going to be redeveloped as a large-scale development, offering that public benefit to the nearby residents to offer some kind of remote parking, either by permit or first come, first serve, however they want to manage it. Maybe they want, parking department to manage it. That was the idea, is that it would be available to the public,
When you say by permit, that would
Residents.
be by fee?
however they want to manage it.
So the building would manage it their way on those.
I think in the past, they've had parking department manage it, and then that way they can pay the parking department and,
By zone, isn't it? They do it by zone.
yes, I'm talking about when we had other large-scale developments, and they've offered some kind of, 10, 20 spaces to be offered to the public by permit only, it's been managed by the parking department.
Do they have to give it for free?
That depends on them.
Can it be charged to the,
I think it's very minimal fee.
but I'm saying, do they have the right to charge? Does it require them to give it away for free?
No. I mean,
So
I
let
guess
me
it
go
depends
back
on
to
how
the.
they want to, how they
My
would want
point
to
is,
manage
okay,
it.
so this is a condo, there's going to be people there, they're going to be finicky about who parks in their building, and they may want to have a control feature how and who parks in the building. It doesn't mean they can't give it away or rent them out or whatever,
Right.
but it's a matter of the condo board deciding who parks in the building. So there's going to be some control there, I think, that helps the building.
Right.
I would agree, but
But I mean, normally the rates are somewhat controlled by, I think there's some terminology that says when we do something like this, it has to kind of meet what the city's current rates are in the city garages.
Right, which is very minimal right now.
Nobody's going to park there because nobody's going to want
Well, I know that they can control it, but the city has a safeguard that says you can't charge more than what we basically do in our city garages. I mean, that's usually the
I see.
safeguard, I think.
That's a
Maybe I'm
concern,
wrong.
yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense.
To keep them from charging $500 a space.
And then nobody.
Right.
Maybe you'll park there, but I certainly would.
I think the idea, for me, the idea would be to really have the maximum amount of spaces available that we can get, meaning the city, for the residents. If we can eliminate the bulb outs, that creates more parking on the street, doesn't get rid of it, then I would look at having less parking available within the complex or the building. But if the bulb out spaces aren't eliminated, then I would have an issue reducing that number. That's just my way of looking at it.
So how do we go about doing that too?
Can I ask the staff, is it possible the board can make a recommendation of not to have the bulb outs on Ponce de Leon as a recommendation in there, if that's
Yeah,
their
we're open to
desire?
that, absolutely. I don't think, do we know where that came from? Did that come from a design from Public
Did that
Works,
come out
or-
of a charrette that was done years ago? Now that,
It looks nice. I mean, instead of having the narrow sidewalk, you now have a place to put a tree,
yeah, but that creates a lot of issues as far as parking.
as far as parking goes.
Yeah.
But the idea is if they have parking within the building, you've resolved the issue. I mean, do we want a nice pedestrian, you know who would fight for this is the empty seat over there. You know, as far as the amenity, the ground level space with the landscaping.
So just go back to the number. So if you take 9 and you lose 4, now you're down to 5. Does that mean your 20 goes down to 16?
I think whatever the board recommends.
Okay, but that's an option
It
that,
wasn't 20 to equal how much they're going to lose on site. 20 was the number that was used for a previous project
okay.
as a placeholder.
So that's where you got it from.
Exactly, yeah.
And on that previous project, how much additional parking did they have?
I don't remember. I can't say.
I mean,
And 5% have to be electric anyway, so.
well, you'd think that'd be a percentage of the parking, not just an arbitrary 20 when the other place had 100 extra parking spaces and they were giving 20. How would the board like to handle it? Mario?
I was going to point out that the previous project where the 20 was suggested, I think was a predecessor project to this one, right?
No, I think
no,
it's
was
it's a project down in the Design Industrial District.
Okay.
I think it's also one that's much more north of here, almost near H Street. I think they also offered some amount of number of off-street parking spaces.
I don't know for sure, but I suspect those buildings are also considerably higher density than this one.
I just hate to give up parking that can be used by the residents when there is a parking problem within that neighborhood. That's just me.
Right. I mean, you know, from our point of view, if there were excess spaces, we could even theoretically be doing this just for good business, right? Renting it out. But I think my client's seeing it as what the obligation is to his purchasers and, you know, the future condo owners and so forth. So I don't know, perhaps if we can come up with a formula that whatever's lost on the street is replaced in the garage, plus maybe a certain number, you know, to try to provide at least some rational connection between the impact of the project and what's being required.
I mean, there is a dollar amount that's associated with each parking space. The developer has additional parking and they'll offer it for sale to units that want to use it. By the same way of looking at it, if they're going to use a high-intensity restaurant that needs additional parking, they want to have that for that also. Is there a requirement for off-site within a certain amount of square feet for a restaurant to be able to retain parking? In other words, if a restaurant comes in and can't retain the parking within its own site, is there a certain amount of feet that it has to look for parking so it can get its license or its CO?
If you were in the central business district, you can park remotely within 1,000 feet.
I remember that discussion. What about here?
And also on Ponce as well.
And Ponce also?
Within 100 feet of Ponce.
Within 100 feet? 100. Okay. I mean, I would be open to some kind of formula myself, because it makes sense.
And we should be tying it to the impact of the project, you know, whatever's being requested.
Vinny?
I'm on the fence. In regards to, you know, the way I look at it, if it's a restaurant, and mostly restaurants work at night, you do have all that street parking. It's all mostly offices on Ponce, so you're going to get people parking. Mostly, I would park on the street versus parking, and I just park and walk half a block and go in. So to me, nighttime may not be the problem. Maybe it's more like daytime when you have, if there's a lunch restaurant, and then that's where it gets a little tricky. So it's more intensity to me during the day than it would be at night. And that you think you're gonna be fine. Any way you do it, you're not gonna have problem with parking on ponds.
During the day, the demand would be, though, probably more commercial related than resident related.
And the residents are not there, they're out working, so it changes, right? So,
How about the 20, the numbers decrease based on the number of spaces that they get back on the bulb outs and so forth?
that's what I was suggesting earlier, then you could get back maybe 5, 6 spaces, and then you're down to 14, 15.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So I understand that the amount of available remote residential parking in the evening shall be based on the loss of on-street parking as a result of the project? Is that what you're?
But it wouldn't just be on the evening in that case. I think it would be overall. Because if you get back parking because there's no bulb out at a certain point, that doesn't just tie into an evening. That's a permanent.
You can't just move your car in the morning because I gotta get out of the parking lot. You gotta just, it's there all the time. If you're using that parking space in the building, you're using the parking space in the building.
Right. Go ahead.
Sorry. Leonard Roberts, 299 Alhambra with Location Ventures. Just to kind of clarify, I believe the parking on Mendoza and Menores are dedicated residential parking. So you're concerned about evening parkers parking on that area? It would be limited because of this residential parking.
Residential parking by permit.
I'm not sure if it's by permit, but it's residential.
Yeah, I don't think there's a permit on Mendoza for sure. I'm not sure about Menores.
Okay.
But yeah, but it's
I mean, this is
residential
something we
parking
would
for there
wanna
because
know.
there's no meters.
Okay.
Right.
But the point is, either way, if you get the bulb outs, you lose those parking spaces. We're just trying to give those parking spaces back. Whether it's by permit, without permit, I think is a better way to look at it since we don't have a definitive answer on that. How about a formula that we discussed? Alex?
My only thing is, I think, well, Vinny brought up a good point, that the transition of, I don't. Can't come up with it.
Chip, any comments?
Well, I like the bump outs. So that's why I'm not commenting.
Well, if the bulb outs stay, then they have to give 20.
Well, I mean, I know you're concerned about condominium owners, but can't you restrict access? I mean, just keep it on the first floor or something like that of the parking garage? Or, you know, I don't know. I've never lived in a condo, so I've never had to worry about the condo board, but Vinny, maybe you can shed some light.
It's a problem.
It's a problem.
They're
Okay,
gonna
I have to
complain.
believe that. I don't know.
I would be in favor of doing a formula, if we can come up with
I
a
would too.
formula.
I would too. I think that if we're not going to do the bulb outs, which is what I'm in favor of, not doing the bulb outs so that we don't lose any space, then we can go ahead and reduce those spaces by the ones that they have to require in the garage.
I think that would be the best.
I think that's going to be the best option so that.
So 16 minus removal.
Correct.
Correct.
You know, we
I'm
could
sorry,
always-
20 less removal.
Why don't we just remove the dog park and put a surface parking lot?
I don't know if the residents out about that would be in favor of that.
All right, let's move forward. So,
All right,
is there a motion?
Is that it?
on my motion.
I'm not
So, so if I'm clear on the condition, it's going to be a minimum of 20 remote parking spaces less any additional spaces that are ultimately provided on street. Is that what you're trying to suggest? So we have something
So
concrete with regard to this?
That's what I would look at.
I'm
Now,
in some form of agreement, but yet I'm somewhat in his camp as well, because I think that the ultimate design should be the right design. Not to say we're going to take all bulb outs because it's the way to do it. I think we should look for what is going to be correct for this street. And if there's going to be best thing is to have one bulb out in the middle, because that's where the tree should be, then maybe this would be a bulb up in the middle, not just. So there should be a thoughtful process as to what the streetscape looks like. And if they can remove bulb outs in the process, great. But if somebody says, guys, this is really going to look better this way, and that's see what I'm saying? I don't think we should just go blurring out.
I also think that the area is already going to be improved. I mean, you have an empty lot there, so you're going to have this beautiful green space without the bulb outs anyway, and the sidewalk would continue just to be linear without those bulb outs, and it'll be fine. And and you're not taking away those parking spaces from the area. So I'm in favor of removing the bulb outs and just whatever parking spaces are gained or not lost, I should say, then we remove them from the 20 parking spaces that you're offering in the garage.
But the bulb outs, I think, would be a determination more by the city.
So here's the best place to look at bulb outs and how the city injected these, and now they're there. It's Valencia, across from Via Valencia. All that street was redeveloped and made to have bulb outs. Some of the bulb outs areas are 4.5 feet, never been cut. They don't get cut. You barely can open the door. They're there. So if you want to look at bulb outs in its true form, go to Valencia. And some of them don't look so good. But there's a purpose for them. The tree roots need that kind of space to be able to put a nice big oak. Otherwise, you're going to get a little palm.
Are these bump outs removing off the menorahs on the side streets as well, or just on Ponce you're talking about?
I think they removed the maximum amount they can remove on Mendoza and Menoras. I
So
think the
what's
only
on
ones
the-
that are remaining are because of the driveway visibility lines.
What's
the
on
10
the other
feet.
side of the street from where this building is going to be built? Are there bump outs on the other
No,
side?
there's not.
Are there planned to be bump outs on the other side? Because
Once they're
we got to
redeveloped.
have some continuity. I think if they're on one side of the street, that means there's going to be.
Exactly, I agree. It looks weird.
It's stupid.
Exactly.
So, and I think our landscaping plan through the city that has been through many reviews requires landscaping, and that's what pushed a lot of this, was bringing more greenery to downtown, and we do that through bump outs instead of blasting up sidewalks with oak roots.
Right. The issue again is the driveways have that 10 feet visibility.
Right.
Triangle visibility. So instead of having, striped paint on the asphalt, landscape would prefer to have an actual bulb out with a tree.
So whatever we do on one side of the street, we have to make sure it's done on the other side.
But the thing is, if you don't have the bulb out and you're walking down a sidewalk and the sun's on that side, you're not going to get any shade. The only way to get shade is to get the tree to be on the side where the bulb out goes. So again, it's not to say bulb out should go, we should scrap it. There's a purpose for these things. So again, it's not a get rid of them and
But
we
remember,
don't need them
Mendoza-
anymore and let's just
But
put
if
park.
the wind's
Mendoza
blowing
and
12
Mendoza-
miles an hour and you're walking down the left side of the street, you're not going to get as much wind if there's bump outs.
Just, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There was a reason for them, so in this case, we should probably look at getting rid of them, sure. But I don't think we should just say they don't have a purpose, they do.
But what I'm saying is I'm actually not saying to eliminate them as a whole. It's really up to the staff and the city
Right.
to take a look at the bulb outs, whether they're really needed, whether they work with the design, to listen to the comments and so forth. I think what I was saying is whatever parking spaces can be brought back in is deducted from the number that city staff is
Correct.
asking.
We've had recommendations in the past. It's been a while, but we've had recommendations in the past to look at the balance between bulb outs and parking spaces in particular projects with the developer working with staff from this point forward, to try to do it. And it sounds like you're heading in that direction with then whatever gain in on-street parking being credited and reducing that number.
It just has to make sense, both for the developer and for the residents. And I think that's the median that we're trying to come up with.
So, getting back to that condition, so it would be a minimum 20 remote residential parking provided that such number may be reduced by the number of off-street parking that's gained through a revision of the site plan, landscape plan? Is that
And I would add
what you're?
that the condo has the method to control who parks there versus not.
Okay.
For implementation, would you prefer to do something like whatever's lost, twice as many as provided inside? My concern is 5 years from now, when they're actually building this and someone's looking from staff who may be new, they won't know what was originally looked at by planning and zoning. So I think having a formula like you're trying to think of, maybe twice as many if that's lost. If they're really going to remove those bump outs on Ponce, maybe there's only 6 or 7 spots, so maybe that'll be only 12 or 14 provided in the garage. Does that
I'll
seem
go
fair?
with that motion. So I will make that be twice what's lost should be provided for And I think that's going to be a fair in-between.
Just,
You're looking at 9, you may get down to 6 or 5, times 2 is 10. That's probably a reasonable number.
I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
So they were losing 9. Under the formula she just proposed, they would have to put back 18,
right,
which is right about where they are now.
which is where they are now.
If they're going to be using the same formula and they come down to 4 or 5 lost spaces, then they have to provide twice of that, which would be back to that 9 or 10. So it's a half we're in the middle.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too.
Is that acceptable to the,
Just want to know how to calculate that, sorry, in the future. So we'll go ahead and measure everything, but there's 4 existing curb cuts there now from the previous establishment. So do we exclude the curb cuts when we count the amount of cars that could park? Because right now, cars park in front of the curb cuts anyway.
I think it's however the parking department determines how to determine these parking spaces that are not metered.
But if at the same time we're gaining spaces that aren't there right now, I think we should also get the credit for that. In other words, if there's not an official on-street parking space on there right now, but we can create one.
Yeah, as long as the parking director, or I don't, it goes through
In other
parking.
words, what the net loss is.
Exactly.
Is what should be.
That's the idea.
Of official parking spaces.
You okay with that?
We'll go with it.
Like to make, is there,
Which one are we on?
so we're on E4, which would be.
no, we're on E3.
I'm sorry, E3,
Right.
which would be a motion for approval in accordance with the staff's recommendations as conditions have been amended.
With the recommendation of G for
That
the underground,
5B.
That would be, well, the amended pursuant to the conditions recommended by staff as amended, which is the amendment with regard to the utility underground regarding FPL and communications only
correct, on Ponce.
on Ponce, and a formula-based determination of the required remote residential parking based upon the loss of off-street parking to be,
The net determination.
right, to be twice whatever the
net
loss of off-street parking is.
As it relates to E. Recommendation E,
As to condition 5E.
correct.
That's the motion.
I will go with that motion, if it can be repeated.
So Vinnie makes
Factually.
that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Alex, second. Any discussion? No, call the roll, please.
Alex Pucello,
Yes.
Claudia Miró,
Yes.
Benny Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. And the
Right,
last one is
So E4 is the site plan, and with the same conditions as
E3.
E3, which is according to the department's recommendation with conditions as amended.
Correct. Is there a motion?
I'll make it.
Claudia makes a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Vinnie, second. Any discussion? No, call the roll, please.
Claudia Miró,
Yes.
Benny Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yep.
Alex Pucello,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Wait.
For E5,
Okay, I thought people were packing
No, no,
books
no,
up
no.
and going.
for E5, is there a motion to grant or to, I guess, to grant deferring or
It's
to
a motion
defer?
to approve deferring of E5 to a date uncertain,
Alex,
subject to
Second.
renotice in accordance with the ordinances of the city.
Alex went ahead and made the motion.
Second.
Claudia, second. Any discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Benny Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Alex Pucello,
Yes.
Claudia Miró,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Thank you very much,
much.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
We only need a motion to adjourn. which is
Jill,
always in order.
Our next meeting is what date?
July 13?
Okay, thank you. 13th of July. Before we adjourn, I just want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a second? All in favor? Aye? Aye.